Good evening, brothers and sisters, friends, truth seekers, and anyone who wandered in here tonight thinking this was just another Wednesday prayer meeting. I see some of you shifting in your pews already. Good. You should be uncomfortable, because what I'm about to lay before you is not a comfortable story. It is not a tidy parable with a neat moral at the end. It is a wound in the skin of the world, a wound that opened in the dead of winter, 1856, right here in the black soil of Ohio, and has never closed. Lean in, closer, because the wind outside these windows tonight sounds almost like the same wind that howled across the Miami Valley that year, rattling the shutters of a little farmhouse on the edge of Preble County. A wind that carried something with it, something that still lingers. It began with 3 cries in the night. 3 cries from 3 throats that should never have drawn breath at all. Let me take you back. The year is 1856. Van Buren is president, though most folks out here don't much care who sits in Washington so long as the crops come in and the fever stays away. The Kansas-Nebraska Act has set brother against brother, and the newspapers are screaming about bleeding Kansas, but in the quiet corners of Ohio, life still moves to the rhythm of the plow and the church bell. Folks marry young, die younger, and trust that the Lord keeps better books than any man ever could. In one of those quiet corners lived Elias and Rebecca Hart. Elias was a cooper by trade, made barrels tight enough to hold whiskey or gunpowder without leaking a drop. Strong hands, quiet tongue, eyes the color of winter sky. Rebecca was small, fierce, Bible always within arm's reach. They had buried 4 babies before their 5th year of marriage. 4 little mounds out back of the cabin, each marked with a river stone and a name that never got spoken aloud anymore. So when Rebecca's belly began to swell again in the spring of 1855, the neighbors watched and whispered and prayed twice as hard. And when the midwife, old Widow Grissom, declared there were not 1, not 2, but 3 heartbeats tumbling inside her like minnows in a bucket, the whole township held its breath. Triplets. In 1856, that was less a blessing than a death sentence. Doctors in Cincinnati said the odds of all 3 living past the first week were less than a snowball's chance in Satan's furnace. Rebecca herself nearly bled out twice before her time came. Elias sold his best mule just to pay for laudanum and clean linen. But on the night of February 14, 1856, yes, Street. Valentine's Day, though there was nothing loving about what happened, a nor'easter came screaming down out of Lake Erie, piled snow against the doors until the house looked half buried, and the 3 babies came into the world anyway. One after another after another. First came Abel, then Cain, then the 3rd one. They never gave the 3rd one a name. Not at first, not ever, not really. Because the 3rd one was wrong. I need you to listen now. Really listen. Abel and Cain were perfect. Pink, squalling, 10 fingers, 10 toes each. Lusty as spring colts. But the 3rd was born silent. Skin so pale it looked blue in the lamplight. A shock of hair blacker than a crow's wing. And eyes, Lord forgive me for saying this in his house, but eyes that were already open. Wide open, looking around the room like he was taking attendance. Widow Grissom dropped her scissors. Said later she felt the temperature in the birthing room fall 20 degrees the moment that child drew breath. Rebecca reached for him anyway. Mother love is stronger than fear, but when her fingers touched his cheek, she jerked back as if burned and whispered one word. Cold. Elias laughed it off. Men do that, said all newborns. Feel cold at first. Wrapped the boy in a quilt stitched from his own mother's wedding dress and laid him between his brothers in the cradle Elias had built big enough for 3. That was the first mistake. By morning, Abel and Cain were warm as biscuits. The 3rd boy was still cold. Not fever cold. Grave cold, and he had not made a single sound. Not a whimper, not a cry, just those eyes, black as well water, watching. They named him Seth, after Adam's 3rd son. A name that means, appointed. A name that means replacement. They should have named him Warning. Because things started happening right away. The milk soured in the pail though the cow was healthy. The Bible on the mantle opened itself to the book of Jubilees, a book most folks didn't even know was in there, and stayed open to the page about the Watchers, the fallen angels who taught men forbidden knowledge. Dogs for 3 miles around refused to cross the Hart property line. And every mirror in the house, there were only 2, cracked clean across the middle the first night Seth slept beneath that roof. Rebecca tried to nurse him. Couldn't. Said it felt like trying to feed a block of ice. So they gave him goat's milk warmed over the fire. He took it, slowly, watching them the whole time with those depthless eyes. And whatever he drank went in, but nothing ever came out the other end. Not once. Not ever. By the time the triplets were 3 weeks old, Abel and Cain had doubled their birth weight. Seth had not gained an ounce. But he grew anyway, stretched, limbs lengthening like shadows at dusk. Fingers getting longer, joints more pronounced. The cradle got tight fast. Elias built a second cradle. Then burned the first one in the yard because Rebecca swore she heard whispering coming from the empty wood at night. Word spread, of course. This is Ohio. Tongues wag faster than horses run. Preachers came. Doctors came. A photographer from Dayton came with his big bellows camera and glass plates, wanting to capture the medical marvel of surviving triplets. He set up his equipment in the dog trot, posed the babies on a black velvet cloth. When he slid the plate into the developer, only 2 babies appeared. Seth had been lying right there between his brothers. You could see the indent in the velvet where his body had rested. But on the plate, nothing. A blank space, like the camera itself refused to see him. The photographer packed up and left that same afternoon. Never sent a bill, never spoke of it again. Some say he took his own life in Cincinnati not 6 months later. Spring came. Redbuds bloomed blood bright along the creek. Abel and Cain learned to smile. Gummy, drooling, perfect baby smiles that made Rebecca cry with joy. Seth never smiled, never cried, just watched. And the animals started dying. First the chickens, one every night, necks wrung clean, bodies arranged in a perfect triangle in the yard. Then the milk cow, found in the pasture with her udder slit open and every drop of milk gone, though the ground around her was dry. Then Elias's best hunting dog, Samson, found hanging from the locust tree by his own leash, tongue black, eyes wide like he'd seen the face of God and didn't like what he saw. Elias cut him down with shaking hands and buried him deep. That night he loaded the rifle and sat on the porch till dawn. At dawn he found boot prints in the frost leading from the barn to the cradle on the porch. Prints too large to belong to any man in Preble County. Prints that stopped dead at the cradle, and did not continue on the other side. Inside the cradle, Seth was staring up at the sky, and for the first time, he spoke. Not a baby sound, not a coo or a gurgle. A word, clear as a bell. Soon, Rebecca heard it from the kitchen window and dropped the cast iron skillet. It hit the floor and shattered into 3 pieces. That was May. By July, Abel and Cain were sitting up, grabbing at each other's faces, laughing the way babies do. Seth still had not gained weight, but he was taller now than both his brothers combined. His skin had taken on a translucent quality, you could see the blue veins beneath like rivers on a map. And the temperature around him, you could stand 3 feet away and feel the warmth of a summer day, step closer, and your breath would frost in the air. People stopped coming to the house. The preacher from Eden rode out once, Bible in one hand, crucifix in the other. He took one look at Seth sitting upright in the cradle, 6 months old and already the size of a 3-year-old, and turned his horse around without a word. Rebecca took to her bed. Wouldn't eat. Kept saying she saw shadows moving in the corners that had no business moving. Elias drank. Drank the whiskey he used to sell by the barrel. Drank until he passed out in the barn with the rifle across his lap. And the triplets kept growing. By harvest time, Abel and Cain were toddling, fat, sun-browned, speaking in that secret twin language babies sometimes have. Seth never walked. He simply appeared places. One moment in the cradle, the next sitting on the roof beams watching Elias shoe the mule. One moment in the yard, the next standing at the foot of Rebecca's bed staring down at her while she slept. And always cold, always silent, always watching. Then came the night of November 3, 1856. A blood moon hung low and swollen over the corn stubble, wind howling like the hounds of hell. Elias had locked every door, every window, barred the shutters, nailed the cellar shut. He put Abel and Cain in the big bed with Rebecca and sat in the rocking chair with the rifle loaded and a bottle in his hand. At midnight, the fire in the hearth went out all at once. No popping, no hissing, just gone. Black. Rebecca woke screaming. The babies were crying. Abel and Cain, high, terrified wails. Elias stumbled to light a candle and saw Seth standing in the doorway of the bedroom. He was 9 months old. He was taller than Elias. Skin white as coffin linen, hair hanging to his waist, eyes like holes punched in the night. And he was holding something in his long, long fingers. 2 small bundles wrapped in the quilt from Rebecca's wedding dress. Abel and Cain stopped crying. The room smelled of river mud and old blood. Elias raised the rifle. His hands shook so hard he couldn't keep the barrel steady. Seth opened his mouth. This time he spoke in Elias's own voice. "Father," he said, "they were never yours to keep." Then he turned and walked out the front door, through it, not opening it, and the latch never moved. Elias ran after him, found the yard empty, found the quilt lying in the frost with 2 perfect, tiny bodies inside. Cold, still, eyes open, arranged side by side like little soldiers. And between them, pressed into the frost, a single bare footprint pointing toward the river. They buried Abel and Cain the next day in the same grave, couldn't bear to separate them even in death. Rebecca never spoke again. She sat in the rocking chair staring at the empty cradle until she wasted away that winter. Elias disappeared the following spring. Some say he walked into the great Miami River with stones in his pockets. Some say he went west and became a preacher himself, warning anyone who would listen about the dangers of wanting too much, of praying too hard for what God never meant to give. And Seth, they never found him. But here's the part that will keep you awake tonight. In 1873, a surveyor mapping the new railroad line came across an abandoned cabin deep in the woods south of Eden. Inside, he found a cradle, huge, hand-carved, big enough for 3. And sitting in that cradle, upright, patient as death, was a man. Tall, pale, black hair to his waist. He looked no older than 20. But when the surveyor asked his name, the man smiled, first time anyone ever saw that, and answered in a voice like wind through dead leaves. "I've had so many." Then he stood up, and the surveyor saw the cradle was lined with children's shoes. Dozens of them, all different sizes, all worn through at the soles. The surveyor ran, didn't stop until he reached Dayton. Told the story to anyone who would buy him a drink. They found the cabin again 2 weeks later. Empty, cradle gone, but carved into the floorboards in letters 6 inches deep were 3 words. Soon. Brothers and sisters, that was over 150 years ago. But every few decades, someone in this part of Ohio finds a cradle that doesn't belong to them. Finds footprints in the frost that stop in the middle of the yard. Finds a tall man standing at the edge of the cornfield watching the house with eyes that have no bottom. And always, when a woman heavy with child prays too hard for the impossible, when she begs God to let them all live no matter what. The wind shifts, the temperature drops, and somewhere, something very old and very hungry smiles with a mouth that was never meant for smiling. I didn't bring you here tonight to scare you for no reason. I brought you here to warn you. Because the veil is thin in Ohio. Thinner than you think, and there are some prayers better left unsaid. Some doors better left unopened. Some names better left unspoken. Look around you right now. Look at the person sitting next to you. Look at the shadows under the pews. Because he's still out there. Still waiting. Still cold. And he's had so many names. May God have mercy on us all.